What is your favorite actual social experiment? There was an experiment at an university where they asked students to rate how confident or shy they were. The students were then paired, one boy and one girl. They chose the boys who were the most shy and the girls who were the most confident. The twist was that they told the boy that the girl was as shy as he was, although she wasn't. In fact, she was super confident and not shy at all. The result was that the boys took lead in the discussions to try to make the girls feel comfortable. The girls did not notice any shyness at all from the boys, and they experienced the boys as totally cool. A couple of years later they talked to the boys again, and for many of them, this experiment had changed their lives, making them much less shy. 5 people were put in soundproof white rooms with all their basic needs met. They have zero contact with the outside room, no internet, cell phones, social media, etc. They are allowed a few items from home to cope with the sudden deprivation of human interaction. One of them brought a sketchbook and art supplies. The social experiment was to see what happens humans cut off complete social interaction, including online, in complete isolation for 5 days. It was basically white room torture, but it was voluntary. At any point, if they feel like they're lost signing, they have a panic button nearby and a psychiatrist will come right away to take them out of the room safely. One of them doesn't even last 5 hours and another stays almost 4 days, but she's losing touch with reality. I thought something was going to happen to the person with the art supplies because you specifically mentioned it. I thought maybe they were able to stay sane longer because they had an endless amount of things to do, because they could draw and write. Or maybe the drawings would get worse and worse, showing the effects of social isolation. During my field camp course for geology, we went to New Mexico for some mapping projects. Along the way, we stopped in Roswell and went to the UFO museum there. If you've been there, you'll know there's a small stage and few rows of chairs facing it toward the back of the museum. One of our professors went up onto the stage and was leaning on the podium, sort of looking like he might give a lecture or something. Over the course of 20 or 30 minutes, people began to sit down in front of the stage, expecting a lecture. After most of the seats were full, our professor just walked away. It was pretty funny to watch. This is amazing. Brain Games did this, except there was just a sign with care. They were nice and made a conga line and gave them all Hawaiian necklaces instead of making them feel dumb. A person at hotel reception sneakily switches out with another person while taking to a customer, and the customer hardly ever notices. Mostly used when the two people look alike, but it sometimes even works with different races, genders, etc. Swapping out. A fancy restaurant ran tap water through rusty pipes and gave it to customers as special mineral water found in only one spring in the world. The customers gushed over its taste and quality. Visit Nurture on YouTube. They did 2 videos, one where 10-12-year-old boys live together alone for a week, and then another with girls. If you've ever been forced to read The Lord of the Flies, you can draw up a lot of conclusions about basic human nature. In the UK there is a well-known illusionist named Derren Brown. Not sure how popular he is abroad, and a lot of what he does is to do with mind games and human behavior. He released a 1-hour documentary on Netflix called The Push, which I thought was insane. The whole premise of the experiment is that people will naturally do what they are told in order to fit in and please others. He selects one member from the public and invites them to the fake launch of a new charity. He then sets up a series of events throughout the night that eventually leads the subject to the decision of whether or not to push a person off a building. It's all fake, of course, and he is behind the scenes telling the actors/actresses what to say. They had one on YouTube years ago called The Heist, where he attempted to convince business people to rob an armored truck. Our medical school puts on a comedy skit every year. Lots of medical students and doctor alumni attend. There was a commotion in the front row. The lights go up. A couple of audience members are leaning over a person. They shout to call an ambulance. Everybody else in the audience is frozen, as they don't know whether it's part of the skit. I call for an ambulance from the back row and run out with them, because my reasoning is that 1. If it's real, they need one. 2. If it's not real, these dumb medical students will learn they can't joke about that when the paramedics show up. Not a single medical student or doctor intervened, rendered assistance, or called for help, because they still weren't sure if it was a joke. Everybody was just frozen in place. Turned out she had a seizure. Maybe they should have said this is not part of the skit. I like to mirror people and it seems to work wonders with getting them to like you. I also notice when it's being used on me. Next time you're standing in line, pass a $1 bill to the guy in back of you and instruct him to pass it back and make sure the next guy's does too. One of my psychology professors in college did a study for her master's degree, where she would dress up in various degrees of sluttiness and track how many free drinks it got her at bars, also broken up by the type of crowd at that bar. In the end it was just an excuse to get drunk a lot, and probably fricked a lot, but she wrote her thesis on the research. There are worse reasons, at least she had a good time, one would hope. So there's this thing called Loot and Dare. It's a game jam where you have either a team and 72 hours or by yourself and 48 hours to make a video game based off a theme that's announced at the beginning. Afterwards everybody plays each other's games and rates them. Last weekend the theme was combined two incompatible genres. My team and I were streaming us playing others' games when one gets suggested by chat by its creator. Fairly common for people to shop their games around all the streamers. This game was described as a combination of single player and multiplayer. Intrigued, we all booted up. Important to note that only one of us was actually streaming his screen. The rest are on Discord. The game is a simple physics-based shooter. It starts up a steps through a simple tutorial. Notably, there are no menus for multiplayer. Suddenly, in the main streamer's game, a new enemy appeared and started fighting. It also typed out some messages in the in-game chat. We were all thinking it was a bot as there was no way to join any kind of multiplayer, and it had started cheating. It wasn't until the enemy referenced something said on stream that we worked out that this wasn't the bot, but rather the creator of the game. This is pretty incredible when you realize that this guy had gone through all of the effort of creating networked multiplayer for his game in 72 hours, but then took it out of the game for everyone but himself. He later told us that it was extraordinarily difficult to convince people he wasn't a bot, mostly because who the frick, in their right mind, would go through all that work but not share it. Don't know if this counts, but I thought it would make for a great little social experiment. Don't know if this counts, but I once went to a wax museum that had some actor, it's been a while, I don't remember who, sitting in a chair and an empty chair next to him to take a picture with him. I decided I would sit still in the empty chair and see if people would take pictures with me. They did. At least they tried until I stood up. In college I baked a large batch of chocolate chip cookies for a house party. I placed them very beautifully on a plate with a note underneath that said there were drugs in the cookies. There were not. Once the note was revealed after many people ate them, they started getting high and acting dumber than usual. It was an interesting night to say the least. I once read about an experiment on a group who were given what they were told were alcoholic drinks. The participants began acting intoxicated, despite the fact that the drinks had no alcohol in them whatsoever. In high school, my friend's psych class stood outside during recess pointing at something in the sky. From a distance away I looked to see if there was anything where they were pointing. Nothing. So I stood beside them, turned and pointed in a different direction. The end of recess saw 50-ish students all standing around pointing at different patches of sky. Some people were just cloud watching. The teacher had a go at me for it. She assumed I had done the experiment the year before at my old school, but I hadn't. I told her that the fact all the students she sent out had clipboards was suspicious and that I was just an extraneous variable. Academic trolling. I love it. Rat heaven. Put a bunch of rats in a box with limited space but unlimited food and water, and eventually the rats will stop breeding and die off. Universe 25. Or the concept of behavioral sync. Milgram shock experiments. Everyone looks at historical incidents and says, how could they do that? I'd never do that if I was in their position. Well, if there was extreme societal pressure, and a person who would be responsible for whatever happens and not yourself, the stats show that yes, you would. Similar to World War I, people know they are about to die and yet still charge the barbed wire. It seems senseless to us, but odds are very good we would do the same if the circumstances ever repeated. The bystander effect is pretty interesting. The more people there are observing an emergency, the less likely anyone is to help or intervene. You might have a heart attack in public, but nobody might come to help you or even call 911 until it's too late. They say that if you feel the need to ask if anyone called 911 you should just do it instead, and at the worst you get a busy signal. And if you get a busy signal, the problems are bigger than someone falling over. My band teacher bought a big container of red vines, see also, Twizzlers, and kept them in his office. Whenever someone asked to have one, he said, "I don't know, those aren't mine." He would then take note of who took them and who didn't after he gave an answer. He did it at the start of every semester to keep track of who would be problem students. I thought it was brilliant. I of course took a couple red vines now and then, but I was an upperclassman by the time he started doing it, so he knew me and that I was a good student already. I was pretty confused when reading this until I found out red vines are like Twizzlers. An economics course was either given a mug or a piece of Swiss chocolate so that their distribution was 50-50. Theoretically, 50% of the class should have traded for the different endowment because they were approximately equal in value. Instead, initial holders asked for 2x as much payment for what they had and very little actually traded. This became known as the endowment effect. In other words, we are less willing to put effort in not losing something than we are in gaining something. I don't recall who it was, but I remember watching a psychology professor demonstrating the emotional projection humans tend to put on inanimate objects. For instance, children with teddy bears and baby blankets. In his experiment he held up a fountain pen at his class and told them, "This is Albert Einstein's fountain pen, retrieved from his desk at home." Everyone passed it around and examined it in awe. Then the professor grabbed a cardigan out of an old box. He said, "This is Jeffrey Dahmer's cardigan, retrieved from his closet in his apartment." No one touched it. No one wanted to pass it around or look at it. Then he revealed to the class that the pen was a random pen from his desk and the cardigan belonged to his daughter. But with the idea of it having been the pen of a genius or the cardigan of a serial killer, it changed the way we view the object as a whole. Was so mind-blowing to me at the time and still is pretty helpful when I need to get rid of something I feel I have an emotional attachment to. I thought Derren Brown's The Push was really interesting. It's on Netflix US at least. It's basically an experiment to see if they could peer pressure someone into committing murder. It had an ending that I wasn't quite expecting and was really intriguing. I kept trying to figure out where my own breaking point would have been. His Russian roulette was terrible to watch, and I still think the very fact so many people watched that live as his greatest social experiment. Watching a man play Russian roulette live and guess which chamber had the live bullet in was just utterly terrifying. The one where they had a kid getting bullied in a fast food joint. A worker would smash the person's food, then the person would go up there and confront the worker, but not the kids picking on the other kid. I sit down in the middle of the row in classroom to see if they have no problem sitting next to me, or if they make a hassle to avoid sitting next to me. It's interesting how the results change from "I'd rather sit on the floor than next to you in school," where people cramped together just to avoid me, and "Oh hi, I don't know who you are, but how are you doing? I hope you have a fine day in uni," where random people I've barely ever spoken with hug me and offer me food. Don't know if this can be considered a social experiment, but the other day an Ask Reddit post came up about what's your favorite would you rather question. Another Redditor answered that his favorite question is, would you rather stop eating meat or kick a baby? It's really fun to see that people will instantly ask, how hard do you have to kick the baby? Will people see me kick the baby, etc. Basically people will try to get into a place in which it would be okay to kick a baby. After I read that, I tried it out on several of my friends and it was always the same. Most often the question was, how hard do I have to kick it? Yeah, never eating meat is something that will affect them for the rest of their life. Kicking a baby is one event. If it can be made okay, they will prefer the it's over and done choice. A University of Bordeaux once ran an experiment where they had wine experts compare red and white wine. They all agreed the red was far superior. Turns out, they just dyed the white wine red and gave them the same wine, and none of the experts could tell. Maybe the dye made it taste nicer. When Grammy Award-winning violinist Joshua Bell played as a busker in a subway station and almost nobody realized they were listening to musical genius. In an experiment initiated by the Washington Post columnist Gene Weingarten, Bell donned a baseball cap and played as an incognito busker at the Metro subway station El Enfant Plaza in Washington, D.C. on the 12th of January, 2007. The experiment was videotaped on hidden camera. Of the 1,097 people who passed by, only 7 stopped to listen to him, and only 1 recognized him. For his nearly 45-minute performance, Bell collected $32.17 from 27 passers-by, excluding $20 from the passerby who recognized him. To be fair, my first thought is, I don't play violin, so I can't really tell the difference between someone playing well and a musical genius, and plus in a busy metro station, people are in a hurry, so it's not all that surprising people didn't stop. I'm not sure what that experiment is trying to say exactly, TBH. Social experiment done by me, so no hypothesis or mission statement but interesting nonetheless. I regularly attend music festivals and love to people watch and see what people do. Recently at Halloween 2017 I had a mask with a creepy fanged smile resembling the Cheshire Cat. To accompany it I had a dark colored hood with a chain and a pair of dark purple circular sunglasses. Alternatively, I was also wearing a large elephant onishi complete with a trunk and big pink ears. While wearing this getup I was handing out candy to the various passerbys, a mix of Starbursts and Jolly Ranchers. Candy that is wrapped individually so as to not make people think there are drugs in them. While passing out the candy I would rotate between the happy elephant hood and the kinda unnerving smile hood glasses combo. I tried a few approaches but the best results came from standing still near an area of traffic and holding one candy piece in each extended hand in a giving gesture. The sheer amount of people who would not accept candy from me while wearing the mask was so drastic compared to the surprisingly large amount of people willing to accept candy from a man in an elephant onishi. Everyone wanted my candy when I was the elephant with the hood up. In fact, I ran through a Sam's Club bag of each. While with the mask pulled up I had a bunch of people see the candy. Some even reached for it, look up to the creepy mask and just keep walking. This wasn't really all that surprising but was the best entertainment. Before ethics ruined experiments on the mentally ill, they took 3 men who believed they were Jesus and put them together in one room just to see what would happen. First, all 3 Jesuses thought they were with 2 mentally ill patients and were very pious about their struggle. Then with time, they began to quarrel about who was holiest, who would reign as the Jesus King. Finally, one revealed himself to be Satan. Even at the time many of the researchers were critical of the morality of it, and few thought it would truly help cure their delusions. I think outside the box ideas are fine, but they're not fooling me into thinking their childlike fascination of oh ho, what's going to happen to next wasn't there. Yeah, this is the kind of crap I do in The Sims. My friend's daughter was starting to wonder if the tooth fairy was real. She lost her tooth and told no one. She put it under her pillow for 2 nights. No money. She told her parents she lost her tooth and lo and behold the next morning there was money under her pillow and the tooth was gone. My favorite social experiment by a 6-year-old. I never believed in the tooth fairy because I always thought you had to keep it secret. Never told my mom. When I confronted her about it, she just said well you never told me and gave me $5. Always thought it was funny that I learned the truth by being quiet. The one where the same man laid down on the ground acting like he's in trouble wearing an expensive suit and then looking like a hobo to see if people stopped to help. Significantly more people helped when he had the suit. Made me kinda sad but was an excellent experiment. I can't find it offhand but I was told this by a guy who was present for it. In the late 70s I believe, the US Navy had an experiment where they sent a ballistic submarine out on patrol with decoy warheads, and the entire purpose of the experiment was to see how the crew would react to getting the order to fire the missiles. So the sub is underway for about a week or 2 in its patrol, and they get the order. The crew does as they have been trained to do and this sub fires its payload of nuclear warheads and then submerges again. The crew not knowing it was a test and the missiles had self-destructed before they could even cross any international boundaries just did nothing. I guess they figured since the world had been killed, who in the US Navy chain of command would care if they just stopped doing their job, and as far as they knew there was no longer a chain of command. It wasn't until a day or so later they broke radio silence to see if anyone was alive. Mind you, they have been thinking that the world had ended a day or so prior, and that they were partly responsible, that they got the recall order. The submariner I talked to didn't mention the fallout of the experiment, but it did prove, I guess, to the Navy's satisfaction that when the day came, their crews would act out the final orders. The use of signing with hearing unimpaired babies. They are able to communicate much earlier. Gross motor control used in signing develops before fine motor control used in speech. Long-term studies show babies taught signing talk earlier, have larger vocabularies, distinguish homonyms, and read expressions better, which helps socialization. These benefits follow all the way through the schooling and standardized testing. There are lots of books about it. My go-to baby present. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.